Hi guys, happy Wednesday. Welcome back to another episode on It's Positively Lana, and we are still in the midst of our Seeing Double series with my co-host Alana, and I'm so excited to get into part 2. I'd like to take a moment before we get into part 2 to give a shout out to those who gave us some excellent feedback on the first part of this video series. One of those people is Toenail Breaker, who made a comment about the euphemisms and also the long history of where racism and colorism ties in. I'd also like to give a shout out to a dear friend of mine who also brought in the element of feudalism and where the elements of racism and colorism do tie together. If you'd like us to elaborate on this more, I'm more than happy to do so, and I know that my co-host would also like to dive deeper into this topic. But for now, let's get into the second part of the video, which left off with us talking about dehumanizing people and the tools that have kind of built those microaggressions and really just perpetuated the same patterns of racism throughout history. I really appreciate you being here. I really appreciate everyone who has been subscribing, commenting, giving feedback. We are here to build community, and myself and my co-host Alana appreciate you guys so much. And if this is the first time that you're seeing my face and Alana's face, please go ahead and subscribe if you want to see us again. Give the video a like or a comment. All right, enjoy, guys.
This is going to be like a total like side step kind of, but I was like, and I don't know if this is going to show my age or not, but just in general, like thinking about what's a good one? Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
The priest guy with Esmeralda. He tells everybody how like pretty much like dirty and vile the gypsies are and all these things, but in reality he wants to covet her specifically, and because she shuns his advances, then he's like, oh well, you're gonna go to hell because you are just like all of these things, when in reality it's a reflection of him. So it's just like, I don't know where it ties into the amount of fear or jealousy or a combination of so many things, where it's just like you saw other people being free and living in a way that was different from you, and instead of trying to understand that, you decided that that needed to be abolished because it was wrong. What they were doing was wrong because you couldn't control them. And then you decided, we're gonna control them and steal their land and steal everything else. Like, I know I kind of got off on the tangent, but it's just like,
no, it's a repeated pattern.
Yeah,
it's repeated, and it does come down to that power and control. And like, you know, as you're saying, how Esmeralda had rejected his advances. Look at that happening in just males in general. Males in general, regardless of your race, like well, it's not all men. I'm not trying to just generalize all men, but this is a very common societal behavioral pattern, is that there's a lot of men, and I won't even call you a man, because if you're going to be cutting down another female because she doesn't want to jump on your bones or make out with you or whatever, that doesn't make you a man. That makes you a coward.
That's going to be another episode. We're going to go real deep into that's a whole other thing. That's a whole other thing. Let's put a pin in that. We're going to put that over. But tying back to where you were going with this, I think what you were bringing up for the repeated pattern and the way that has really tied together of using fear and building that image and ingraining that in how people view a certain subset of society or just an entire race of people. Knowing what you know now, when do you feel like, or what was the first instance that you remember as a young tot feeling slighted on either side or both sides in being a mixed raced woman or that child?
Sure. I think for me on the Filipino side, it was when I was a little kid and being told to stay out of the sun because I'm going to get too dark. And I'm like, well, you just not want me to go outside at all? Like, I'm a kid, I want to go and play. I can't not get dark. And then I used to get my nose pinched. They would tell me they would pinch my nose because they want my nose to get bigger. My nose isn't big already. I mean, not even already. My nose isn't big, period. But like that was part of like.
Do we have the same nose?
Little cute nosies. Like from like the Filipino side, I didn't feel it too much, but I also didn't like grow up with a lot of Filipino people around me aside from my immediate family.
Mhm.
And then those others who kind of like extended family. I've always been weird about like people I've never met before, and I'm supposed to be like, oh my God, who are you? I know this sounds bogus, but I'm like, for real, like, who are you? We got blood, but that doesn't mean a thing to me because you haven't been a part of my life at all. So
But now we're getting there where we're gonna be those people where like we saw little babies and now they're like teenagers or something, and then I'm be like, oh, I remember when you were like 5, and then they're gonna be like, oh, who's this weirdo like telling me
true story. That's totally gonna happen because I'm watching my friends, like my old roommates, her son is growing up now. I'm like, oh my God, it's 13 years. It's been so long since I've seen him. And he's one day he's gonna be like, who the hell are you, lady?
And now we have to
Don't act
remember
like you know me.
that was us not too long ago. God.
That's still me.
True though. True though. But I'm sorry, getting back.
It's okay. It's okay. We're going off there a little bit. But you asked about being slighted on either side.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the Black side, feeling slighted by my Black community was being told that I sound white, being told that I actually get kind of judged because I've dated white guys. Like, that hurts. But, you know, being on the side of experiencing racism happened when I was 7 years old on the playground. And there was this little boy that I wanted to play with. He was this white kid. And I went over and tried to play with him. And he says, I can't play with you because you're Black. I'm like, what? What is Black? What is that? You know, my mom, she raised me to be colorblind, though I'm certain it was within good intentions. That's not, we know now that being colorblind is not helping or saving anybody. It's just removing your responsibility to acknowledge skin color. But so me growing up with being colorblind, I had no idea why this kid was rejecting to play with me. So when I went home, oh, actually, mind you, this kid was not by any adults to prompt him to say that. This child had no problem just letting that naturally come out of his mouth.
Which tells you exactly what's happening at home. Because he got that from somewhere.
Yeah. Home is not teaching him to be anti-racist, even though home base may be teaching him to be not racist. They're not teaching children how to be anti-racist. So when you're not teaching your kids to be anti-racist, everything else around these young, influential minds will be influenced on how to become racist, how to be racist, how to say racist things, how to just be like the rest of the society. So yeah, like that's because of that incident alone is why trying to uproot racism is of the utmost importance to me right now. And I feel like this is like one of the most passionate parts for me right now because like it's happening every single day. I talk to my other friends of color who have children and their kids are experiencing their first bout of racism on the playground.
The same thing. Same pattern. Same pattern. Now, I think we're going to switch gears just slightly, but this is definitely in the same vein that we were just speaking. I can already tell, because it happens already, where we're going to need to get into, I guess, a more uncomfortable topic, which is being of mixed races. You and I have experienced or have the same perspective, and I think I've had to code switch a little bit more than maybe you have in your history, because again, you said you grew up in predominantly white suburban areas and your friends had kind of been along that same line because that's what you had, like that was the main population of people. But I know that it's like we catch flack from both sides, and I just want people to be able to see that if you are a Black woman and then you put down other Black women, Because no matter what you say to me, yes, I'm light-skinned. I know this. I obviously know this about myself. But you shunning me doesn't make it any better. And do I disagree that it's like the representation of Black women is predominantly light-skinned women? That is a problem. Like, colorism is a problem.
Yeah.
But what I'm what I'm saying doesn't make it any less valid that it's like I'm thrown in the same boat with you and then also shunned by you because we're sitting here and talking about the spectrum of color, and it's like, it's never enough. It is never enough. And that is the thing that I want people to start to actually realize, that it's like, we all carry our own biases, and until we can actually knock that part down, none of this is going to get fixed. Because like, us hating each other doesn't fix the problem. It just continues to perpetuate the same thing that has been going on throughout the years. Yeah. So do you have your own comments about kind of what you've experienced, or where you stand and where you see yourself now as a Black woman?
So you mentioned the women putting down other women and colorism, and I recently noticed this in myself. You know, I didn't know where it came from, where these actions and emotions stemmed from, but I found myself to be uncomfortable sometimes, feeling like a Black woman in predominantly Black spaces because of my upbringing, because I've been told I talk white.
You're like, oh no, they're gonna know.
Yeah,
they're
right?
gonna figure it out.
But I think a lot of that also comes from, you know, because the kids that I was around, like in public schools, they would be mean to me. And as I've been trying to like understand more about colorism and do my own research, is that this perspective that I hear from a lot of darker skinned African American women is that the lighter women are mean to them, because being so dark has been so ingrained to be ugly and to be stupid. Like, the darker you are, the worse it gets, the worse those biases get. So I feel like having those experiences as a child and the darker skinned girls being really mean to me has bled into my upbringing, where like sometimes I find myself like really nervous around women who are darker than me. So I'm like, God, do they hate me? Like, I don't want you to hate me. I want to love you. But I'm like, there's this subconscious or like unconscious kind of like reaction that's in me to like want
just like
to
you just feel like you just don't belong, and you just don't know what to say, because it's like that awkward space of, you're just like, I've always been pushed out here and also never been accepted here, so I just don't know which way to move.
Yeah, in a sense, yeah. And it's also like a culture shock for me too, because I wasn't raised around Black people. I didn't have Black friends. The Black friends I did have, they went to the predominantly white schools that I did, so they're kind of like me. Or they're all adopted, you know, they were adopted by white parents. So like, even then still, they're also removed from their Black culture and their heritage. We've all assimilated to whiteness. So when I'm around, you know, darker skinned women, and I try to explain this to them, I don't feel like they hear me, because they're like, you are Black, like, you look at you, you're Black. And I'm like, you know, and then I hear that, you know, the one drop rule, that's a European construct. And I'm just like, y'all, I'm not talking about my skin. I know that I'm Black. If you see me from down the street and the cop sees me from down the street, he's gonna see this. He's gonna think the first thing he's gonna think is I'm Black before he even sees my eyes to see that I'm multiracial. I understand that my skin is Black, but what I'm talking about is the culture of upbringing and how you have been influenced as a human being to move throughout the world, the lens that you have to look at this world. I have two different lenses. But when I'm trying to explain one lens to the other, they don't get it. They don't understand. And oftentimes I feel like the uncomfortable conversations don't get very far, because they get uncomfortable enough to just listen long enough to speak. And they're not listening long enough to try to understand or ask questions to understand. And only one Black woman caught it. And she said, oh, well, there was another Black woman, she was saying, you know, that I overthink things, like I am Black. And you know, that she also grew up in white neighborhoods. But I was like, but you had a Black family, right? So then another Black woman, she's like, oh, so this is a culture shock to you. That's it. Like, I didn't have the words to really describe that at the time, but yeah, that's a culture shock, because even though these other African-American women have grown up in predominantly white spaces, they still had a Black family. There's still roots behind that. There's still the culture of being in a Black space, and I didn't have that.
And
so
that's where you and I also intersect in upbringing, because the way I would kind of describe it is everything was kind of watered down for me, where again, like I didn't know my dad's family, and he himself was actually adopted, but he grew up more in the South. But again, we didn't have a very strong relationship. We have a working relationship now, but I didn't know my Mexican side of the family, and we had like food seems to be the thing that everybody wants to hold on to. Come on now, it's delicious.
Yeah.
But food and like some small traditions, but after my great grandparents passed, like the language piece was gone completely. And again, everything was kind of diluted. Everything had kind of been watered down to be digestible enough where it's not too different, like American tacos, where it's like, yeah, like it's a taco, but you serve it with, you know, cheese, sour cream, and tomatoes and lettuce on top. Like that's the most Americanized version of a taco that you can have. Sorry if that's your favorite taco, like you live your life, but just letting you know, some things have been switched around here. Like, but that's kind of my point. And then my grandfather, who actually was pretty much disowned his family for my grandma, which is, if you've ever met my grandpa, that's very shocking, because he's very stubborn, doesn't really emote much. He's very, very just like grew up, you know, early 40s, just worked, provided, no emotions. But his family was prejudiced against Mexican people, and he chose my grandma and said pretty much like, screw you, I love her, doesn't matter where she comes from. So that's like, to have him say that, but then also still have prejudices, is very confusing. Like, but
constant contradictions.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing though, and like where we're coming from now is, you from the outside in, these are the assumptions that people have, but then when you really get down to it, not having those cultural seeds when you're younger, I wouldn't say sets you up for failure, but it sets you up to be that outsider no matter where you try to fit in.
Mm-hmm.
So like I feel you on that in just in other realms of culture, but it's like the same story just told over and over and over again. That's why I was like, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of the same story, same pattern.
Yes, ma'am. I'm sick and tired of these patterns myself. This is why we need to disrupt them. This is why we're having these conversations.
This is why we're having this conversation. So I think that you presented a unique perspective that, again, it does make me uncomfortable, because I don't know how it's going to be received, but that doesn't make it any less valid of what's actually happened. And you and I agree on the fact that in order to move forward, the disruption, the uncomfortable conversations, they have to happen. Well, they don't have to. We can choose for them to happen, to actually make forward momentum. And it's not always an easy path, but
yeah, there's a lot of resistance. There's a lot of resistance in people to face and address racism, and even to examine it within themselves. There's a huge resistance, because nobody wants to be labeled a racist. Nobody wants to associate themselves with such a word, because, you know, there's when you think of racists, you think of bad people. You think of really violent acts of killing and brutalizing and lynchings and cross burnings. Like,
and personally, I think of all the microaggressions.
Me too. Me too. And to me, that's how racism has evolved over the years. Because, as physical violence is now frowned more so on by everyday people, if you don't have a license and a badge to kill. So we have changed how that racism shows up. It's changed, it's hidden in the words that we use, the microaggressions that we exhibit when we're around other people of color. It shows up in our lack of eye contact, or you staring too dang hard.
What you looking at?
Yeah. I did it the other day. Some dude comes over I'm like, excuse me, you are staring extra hard. Is everything okay? He's like, you're just sexy. I'm like, oh God. Yes, I know this. How sexy is my soul though? Do you know about that part?
I know this and backpack. Well, you and I have just gotten the ball rolling, and I think that this is a good digestible piece to start with for people to start knowing where we're going with this. So, Alana, I would like to thank you so much for your time for today, and I look forward to having further conversations on branching topics from where we're just starting and really bringing that uncomfortable, disruptive momentum to what's been going on in this last year. So, looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really looking forward to these. I'm so grateful that we have decided this is what we want to bring forth into the world and bring this awareness to our intersectionalities and what it is like to exist in this country. So yes, I'm really excited. I'm so excited that you wanted to do this. Thank you for having me, and thank you for offering the platform to do this.
Do you want anybody to follow you on different social medias, or are we just going to keep it to these conversations for right now?
If folks want to follow me on Insta, you can follow me at alana.rose. That's AHLAHN as in Nancy, AH.Rose.
I love you did the phonetic because they'll never say it right otherwise.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, I'm going to call it for today, but we are just getting started.
Yes, we are.